What happens when two young minds, tired of taking hits, decide to stand up for themselves? The sun was beginning to set over Fairview High, casting an amber glow across the campus. Tarek and Tyler, identical twins, stood near the school's back gate, their eyes scanning the parking lot as students filed out for the day. The twins had been through a lot over the years, but this day felt different. Today wasn't like the usual after-school routine. Today, they were tired. Tired of being pushed around, tired of hearing the whispers, tired of pretending the taunts didn't bother them. It had started small. Subtle. The kind of bullying that people could ignore, at first. Little jabs, quiet insults, snide remarks about their skin, their hair, their culture. The usual racist comments that made them feel like outsiders, as though they didn't belong in this predominantly white high school. Tarek always tried to stay calm, to ignore the hurtful words. Tyler, on the other hand, was the jokester. He tried to brush it off with humor, cracking jokes to make others laugh, hoping it would lighten the mood and stop the cruelty. But today, the air was different. Today, the tension was thick. The last few weeks had been unbearable. The taunts were no longer subtle. Derek, the captain of the football team, along with his group of jocks, had made the twins their targets. It wasn't enough to make fun of their names or their family. Now, it was the color of their skin. It was the way they walked, the way they talked. It was everything about them that made them other. "Hey, black boys," Derek had said earlier that day, shoving Tyler in the hallway. "Why don't you go back to the jungle? This is a real school, not some ghetto." Tyler had laughed it off, just like he always did. But there was a crack in his smile that even Tarek could see. Tyler was getting tired. Tarek was getting tired. They were both tired of trying to pretend they weren't being broken down every single day. They walked in silence as they headed toward the back gate, the sound of sneakers scuffing against the pavement the only noise between them. Tyler was the first to break the silence. "You think we can just, I dunno, transfer to a new school? Start fresh somewhere? No one would know who we are." Tarek shook his head, keeping his eyes on the road ahead. "It wouldn't matter. Wherever we go, people will find out. It's not about the school, Ty. It's about them, about how people like Derek think they can just tear us down." Tyler sighed. "I know. But I'm so sick of it. Every single day. I don't want to feel like this anymore." Tarek felt the same way. The weight of the world seemed to settle on his shoulders every time he walked through those school doors. They had their circle of friends, but even they couldn't shield them from the constant barrage of insults. The twins had talked about this moment before. The moment when enough was enough. They had imagined it in their heads, playing out scenarios where they stood up to Derek and his crew, where they weren't just victims anymore. But now that the moment was here, the reality was much more complicated. What if standing up meant making things worse? What if it led to more pain? Tarek clenched his fists. "We can't keep letting them win, man. We need to do something. I don't care if it gets ugly. We've got to make them see that we're not weak." Tyler nodded, his jaw set. "Yeah. We're not weak." Just then, a car pulled into the parking lot. Tarek could see Derek and his crew laughing, their voices carrying across the yard. They were laughing at something, likely at the expense of someone else. Tarek could feel his blood start to boil. The old feeling of helplessness began to creep in, but he quickly shook it off. "Let's go," Tarek said, turning to face his brother. "It's time." Tyler gave a small, determined grin. "You sure about this?" Tarek didn't hesitate. "Yeah. It's time." They walked toward the parking lot, their hearts pounding with the same mixture of fear and resolve. It was like stepping into a storm. They knew the risk. But for the first time in a long time, they weren't thinking about the consequences. They were thinking about what was right. As they got closer to the group of bullies, Derek looked up and flashed a cocky smile. "Oh, look who it is. The twin monkeys. You guys really think you can walk around like you belong here?" Tarek and Tyler stopped just a few feet away, standing their ground. Tarek's heart raced, but his voice was steady. "We're tired of being your joke, Derek. It ends today." Derek's smile faltered for a moment, clearly surprised by the challenge in their voices. He glanced at his crew, who were now watching the twins with raised eyebrows. "You want to fight me or something?" Derek sneered. Tyler didn't flinch. "We don't want to fight. We just want you to leave us alone." Derek laughed, his friends joining in. "Yeah, right. You think I'm just gonna back off because you say so?" For a moment, Tarek's stomach twisted in knots. Was this the right choice? Could they actually win this fight? But then he remembered something. Their parents. The lessons they had taught them. How they had always said, never let anyone tell you that you don't matter. Stand up, speak out, and the world will listen. He wasn't going to back down. Not anymore. "You might be able to talk down to us, Derek," Tarek said, his voice calm, yet filled with the kind of strength he hadn't realized he had until now. "But we're not afraid of you. And we're not afraid to fight back." For a brief second, Derek's smirk wavered. Then, he turned to his friends and laughed again. "All right, whatever. But don't say I didn't warn you." As Derek and his crew turned to leave, something inside Tarek shifted. He didn't know what was going to happen next. But he knew one thing for sure: today, they weren't going to let themselves be bullied anymore. "Let's go home," Tarek said quietly. Tyler nodded, the weight of the moment settling between them as they walked away. They were no longer just two boys trying to survive high school. They were two brothers ready to fight for their dignity. And in that moment, everything changed. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Tarek and Tyler were inseparable. Born just 5 minutes apart, they had always shared a bond that went beyond blood. Growing up in the small town of Fairview, the twins were used to being different. Fairview wasn't exactly a place where diversity was celebrated. In fact, they were often the only black students in their classes, making them stand out in ways that weren't always kind. But even though they were seen as outsiders, the twins had always managed to hold their heads high. They learned from a young age that their strength didn't lie in conforming to others' expectations, it lay in sticking together and relying on each other. Tarek was the quieter of the two. Where Tyler was outgoing and full of jokes, Tarek had a calm, introspective nature. He loved to read, his mind often wandering into books about history, art, and philosophy. He wasn't one for confrontation, and it wasn't that he was afraid of standing up for himself, he just believed there were other ways to solve problems. Tarek spent hours in his room, drawing pictures of their future, the world as he wished it could be, one where people didn't judge based on the color of their skin, one where race didn't determine someone's worth. But even with his quiet demeanor, Tarek wasn't immune to the world's harsh realities. At school, he'd learned to hold his head high even when Derek and his crew made fun of his curly hair, or his dark skin, or his name. Tarek had learned to laugh it off at first, convincing himself that it didn't matter. But the constant barrage of insults, the whispered comments, and the snide glances had begun to chip away at him. Tarek found solace in his art, in the pages of his books, and in his twin brother, who had a way of making him laugh when he felt like he couldn't anymore. Tyler, on the other hand, was the extrovert. The class clown. The joker who could make anyone laugh, no matter how bad things seemed. It was his way of coping with the hate they faced. He couldn't change the way the world saw them, but he could make it a little more bearable, at least for himself. Tyler was always the first one to step in front of a bully, cracking jokes and trying to deflect the attention away from the two of them. But Tyler's humor, the way he played off every insult with a sarcastic comment or a funny remark, was his armor. Deep down, it hurt. It hurt when Derek called him a monkey for the 100th time. It hurt when people at school looked at him like he was a threat simply because of his skin color. It hurt when people assumed he couldn't be smart or capable just because he didn't fit their mold of what a black kid should be. But Tyler never let it show. Not on the outside. Their parents, Sarah and James, had been a constant source of love and strength throughout their lives. Both came from humble beginnings, but they had worked hard to build a better life for their children. Sarah, an attorney, had been a trailblazer in her own right, often one of the only women of color in her field. James, an educator, was passionate about giving back to their community. Together, they instilled values in the twins that were rooted in self-respect, integrity, and the importance of education. But even with their guidance, it wasn't always easy. The town of Fairview, with its deep-rooted biases, wasn't always welcoming. Their parents had taught them how to navigate the world with dignity, but sometimes, that dignity was tested to the limit. One day, during a family dinner, their father, James, had sat them both down and looked them in the eye. "Boys," he said softly, "you will face challenges that others will never understand. You will be tested, sometimes by people who should be your allies. But remember, how you handle adversity says more about you than any insult ever will." Tarek and Tyler listened closely, both absorbing their father's words in their own ways. Tarek had always believed in his father's advice, internalizing it and using it as a compass. Tyler, on the other hand, was more rebellious, often laughing it off, believing that he could handle anything as long as he had humor on his side. But neither of them had anticipated just how much their lives would change when they hit high school. High school was supposed to be a fresh start, but the bullying began on day one. At first, it wasn't anything overt, just the occasional whisper in the hallway, the glance that lasted a little too long, the quiet laughter when they passed by. Tarek and Tyler thought it was something they could ignore, something they could deal with. But as the months went on, the teasing grew more intense. It started with the football team, led by Derek, the school's star athlete. He was charismatic, popular, and seemed to get away with anything. Derek and his friends would make crude jokes about the twins' heritage, calling them things like African jungle animals and the two monkeys when they passed by in the hallways. At first, the twins tried to ignore it, hoping it would stop on its own. They believed that if they didn't react, it would lose its power. But it didn't. One afternoon, after a particularly nasty encounter with Derek's group, Tyler had come home, his usual confidence replaced with anger. "I'm so sick of it, Tarek. I just want to punch them all in the face," Tyler had spat, throwing his backpack onto the couch. Tarek had tried to calm him down, but he understood the frustration. He had felt the same way. There was only so much anyone could take before they started breaking. That night, as they lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, they talked about what their parents had taught them. About how important it was to stay calm, to be the bigger person. But both of them knew that sometimes, standing up meant more than just holding your ground. Sometimes, it meant fighting back. And that's when they made a decision. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be pretty. But they were going to stop being victims. They were going to stand up for themselves, not just for the two of them, but for everyone who had ever been made to feel like they didn't belong. They didn't know what the next day would bring, but they knew it was time to stop pretending. The morning bell rang at Fairview High, signaling the start of another school day. But for Tarek and Tyler, today felt different. The weight of their decision to stand up for themselves hung in the air, palpable like a storm cloud just waiting to break. They had talked about it all night, and now, here it was. No more pretending. No more avoiding. They would either stand tall or be overwhelmed by the weight of everything they'd been through. Tyler, always the optimist, tried to lighten the mood. "Maybe today will be the day they finally leave us alone. Maybe they'll get bored or just find someone else to target." Tarek couldn't help but smile at his brother's attempt to keep things light. "You know that's not going to happen, right?" he said quietly. "You've seen how it's been." Tyler shrugged, trying to mask his unease. Yeah, I know, but a guy can hope, right? Tarek glanced at his brother, his gaze thoughtful. Tyler was known for his humor and his ability to deflect, but Tarek knew his brother was just as nervous as he was. The tension between them and their classmates, especially Derek and his friends, had been building for a while. Every day had felt like walking on eggshells. But today, they couldn't avoid it any longer. They had to face it head-on. As they walked down the crowded hallways, the whispers started. The stares, the quiet snickers, nothing too loud, but enough to make it clear they were still the targets. Tarek could feel the familiar sting in the air, a kind of tension that made the walls of the school feel smaller. But he noticed something in Tyler's stance. Despite the tension, Tyler was holding his head high, as if ready for whatever was coming. Tarek couldn't help but admire his brother's resilience. But deep down, Tarek knew that the casual bullying would soon escalate. Derek, the popular football player who seemed to have it all, had been leading the charge for months. At first, the teasing had been subtle, little remarks that could be shrugged off. But now, it was becoming more direct. More cruel. They had made it clear to Derek that they wouldn't stand down, and the more they showed their strength, the more Derek seemed to want to prove a point. The twins stopped at their lockers, gathering their books for the next class when the familiar voice broke through the hum of students around them. Well, if it isn't the dynamic duo, Derek's voice rang out, sharp and cutting. Tyler turned, meeting Derek's gaze without hesitation. "What's up, Derek? Still trying to get attention by picking on us?" Derek smirked. "You think you're something special, huh? Just because you're the only ones here who don't fit in? You really think people want you here?" Tyler's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "Actually, we don't need to fit in. We're fine just as we are. But you? You're the one who has the problem." Derek took a step closer, his expression growing more hostile. "Oh, I have a problem all right. You and your brother. You both walk around here like you own the place. You're not even welcome." The word stung, but Tyler wasn't about to back down. "You can say whatever you want, Derek. But you're not gonna scare us. Not anymore." Behind Tyler, Tarek felt a wave of frustration. He knew how hard this was for his brother, how much Tyler hid behind his jokes to cover up the hurt. Tarek wanted to step in, to calm things down before it escalated, but he also knew that if they didn't push back now, things would only get worse. Derek's eyes flicked to Tarek, his smile widening with a malicious gleam. "And you, Tarek? Are you just gonna stand behind your brother, hoping he does all the talking for you? You think you're better than me, too?" Tarek's chest tightened. He wasn't going to let Derek's words get to him, but it was hard to ignore the underlying threat in Derek's tone. Derek had a way of making his insults sting just a little more than they should, and it was hard not to feel small in those moments. Tyler, sensing the shift, stepped up again. "No, Derek. We're not better than anyone. We just want to be left alone. But clearly, you can't take a hint. So here's the deal, you either back off, or we'll make it clear we're done being your punching bags." Derek chuckled darkly, turning his back on them. "You think you can intimidate me? You two are pathetic. Just stay out of my way, or I'll make sure you regret it." Tyler didn't hesitate this time. "You've been saying that for months, Derek. But you're still running your mouth. So what's next? Are you gonna try to get the whole school to gang up on us?" Derek didn't respond, but his eyes flicked to his friends standing nearby. They were waiting for him to make a move, waiting for him to escalate things. But Derek didn't do anything. He just gave them a final look and walked away, his friends trailing behind him. For a moment, the hallway was silent. It felt as though everyone was holding their breath, waiting for the next move. The twins exchanged a look, part disbelief, part relief. Did we just win?" Tyler asked, his voice low and unsure. Tarek let out a breath, his heart still racing from the tension of the moment. "I don't know. But I don't think that's the last we'll hear from him. Tyler shook his head, frustration still evident on his face. I'm so sick of it, Tarek. He's not going to stop, is he? Tarek's voice was steady as he spoke. No, he's not. But we have to be ready for it. If we let him keep pushing us around, it'll never end. The twins stood together for a moment, letting the reality of the situation sink in. They had made their stand, and while they hadn't backed down, they also knew it wasn't over. Derek wasn't going to let them go that easily, and the fight was far from won. But they had taken the first step, and that meant something. Tyler looked at his brother, determination in his eyes. You're right. We're not backing down anymore. Tarek nodded. No matter what comes next, we face it together. As they walked to their next class, there was a new sense of purpose between them. The conflict had only just begun, and they knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But for the first time in a long time, they felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They were done being passive. Done being silent. And most importantly, they were done letting anyone push them around. The next few days at Fairview High felt like a whirlwind. Tarek and Tyler tried to go about their usual routines, but the fallout from their encounter with Derek and his friends lingered in the air. They couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. Their once quiet existence, where they tried to blend in and avoid confrontation, had been shattered. But even as the tension continued to rise, the twins could feel a subtle shift. Something was different this time. It wasn't just the way Derek and his group had backed off so suddenly. It was the way the rest of the students seemed to be reacting. Whispers that had once been taunts were now more like murmurs of curiosity. Derek's usual posse, who had been quick to laugh at his jabs, had started to fade into the background, unsure of what to do next. For once, Tarek and Tyler weren't the ones cowering in the corner. They were walking the halls with their heads high, no longer shrinking from every glance or hushed conversation. They weren't afraid to be seen anymore. Still, the shadow of Derek and his influence was ever present. Derek was a force to be reckoned with, a student who commanded attention without saying much. His presence in the school was almost a given. He wasn't just popular, he was dominant. And despite the standoff between him and the twins, Tarek knew that Derek wouldn't stay quiet for long. But they weren't backing down. Not anymore. One afternoon, as the twins were leaving their final class of the day, they spotted Derek in the hallway, standing with his usual group of friends. They didn't flinch. They didn't turn away. They didn't pretend they hadn't seen him. Instead, they kept walking, side by side, right past him. Derek noticed them, his eyes narrowing as they passed. For a moment, it looked like he might say something, but then, to the twins' surprise, he didn't. He didn't even move. The group of friends behind him exchanged looks but said nothing. Tyler leaned in toward Tarek, speaking in a low voice. Is he backing off? Tarek raised an eyebrow. I think he's waiting for the right moment. The twins didn't say another word as they made their way outside to the schoolyard. They didn't feel the familiar anxiety that usually followed them in Derek's presence. They were walking on new ground now, no longer just trying to survive the school day, but actively choosing to face it. The following days were a blur. Derek still shot them dirty looks when they crossed paths, but he didn't seem as bold as before. The threats weren't as direct, and the name-calling was quieter. The twins couldn't help but feel that maybe they had done the right thing by standing up for themselves. But there was still a sense of unease in the pit of Tarek's stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that the calm wouldn't last. And he was right. A week later, as the twins were walking to their lockers, they spotted Derek again. This time, though, he was not alone. He was flanked by a few more of the popular kids from his circle. They all stood in front of the lockers, blocking the twins' path. Tarek stopped in his tracks. This time, there was no easy way around it. He could feel the pressure building. His heart rate quickened, but he stood his ground. Tyler, standing next to him, didn't miss a beat. "What's up, Derek? You going to say something now, or just stand there?" Derek smirked, his eyes glinting with that same arrogance. Well. If it isn't the tough guys. You really think you've won, huh?" Tyler raised an eyebrow. "I don't know. You seem to be the one looking a little off." Derek's friends chuckled behind him, but there was something different in the air. The usual bravado Derek carried was fading, replaced with something more calculating. Tarek felt his stomach drop. He knew this moment would come. They hadn't seen the end of it. "What, you think just because you stood up to me once means you've got the upper hand?" Derek's tone was harsh now, but his eyes were uncertain. "You think people actually respect you for that?" Tyler didn't hesitate. "Respect doesn't come from backing down. It comes from standing up, no matter what. Maybe you should try it sometime." For a moment, Derek didn't know how to respond. The usual insults weren't working. The typical taunts weren't landing. Tarek could see it in Derek's eyes, he was trying to regain control of the situation. But the thing was, Tarek and Tyler weren't afraid anymore. Not like before. The energy between them had shifted. They weren't the same scared boys who had spent their days dodging his insults. "You're wasting your time," Derek finally said, his voice a little more strained than before. "You two don't belong here. You're never going to be like me." Tarek stepped forward, his voice steady. "We don't want to be like you, Derek. We just want to be ourselves. And if that bothers you, maybe you should look in the mirror." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Derek's friend seemed to sense the tension and slowly started backing away. Derek's eyes flicked to them, a flicker of uncertainty in his gaze. It was as if he was waiting for someone to stand by him, to back him up. But no one moved. For the first time, Derek was alone. And for the first time, Tarek and Tyler didn't feel small. "I don't need this," Derek muttered under his breath, and with that, he turned and walked away, his group trailing behind him, awkwardly silent. The twins watched him go. They didn't feel victorious exactly, but they knew something had changed. They had just witnessed Derek back down, and that meant something. They had gained ground. Tyler let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Wow. I think we might have just cracked him." Tarek nodded. "Maybe. But we have to stay on guard. It's not over." For the first time, though, Tarek didn't feel like they were just trying to survive. This wasn't about avoiding Derek or hoping he'd get bored. No. This was about something deeper. They were learning to push back, not just in the face of Derek's insults, but in the face of the fear and doubt that had held them back for so long. They didn't know exactly what would happen next, but one thing was clear, they had taken a step they'd never be able to undo. And no matter what came next, they were ready. The next few weeks passed by in a blur, each day blending into the next. The twins felt the shift in the air, but it wasn't the victory they had hoped for. Instead, it was a tense calm, like the world holding its breath, waiting for something to break. Derek hadn't made a move to escalate things since that day in the hallway, and it felt as if he was biding his time, planning his next step. His eyes still followed them, but there was something different about the way he looked at them now. It wasn't the usual arrogance, it was almost wary. But for Tarek and Tyler, the silence was deafening. They had expected some kind of closure, but there was none. There was only this unsettling quiet, and in that quiet, everything felt like it was hanging in the balance. One Friday afternoon, as the twins made their way to the school parking lot, they spotted Derek by the side of the school building, talking with some of his friends. This time, however, something was different about the way Derek stood. His posture wasn't the usual cocky stance, he seemed smaller, almost vulnerable. But before they could think too much about it, Derek's eyes locked onto theirs. "Hey!" Derek called out, his voice cutting through the hum of students around them. Tyler and Tarek stopped dead in their tracks, exchanging a quick glance. There was no hesitation this time. They walked towards him, both of them bracing themselves for whatever was coming. Derek took a deep breath, his hands shoved into his jacket pockets. "I need to talk to you guys." The twins exchanged another glance, this one more skeptical than anything else. "About what?" Tarek asked, his voice guarded. Derek hesitated for a moment, then gestured to the side, as if signaling them to follow him away from the crowd. "Just, come with me. It's important." There was a moment of silence between the twins. Neither of them knew what to expect, but Tyler spoke first. "All right. We'll listen. But if this is some kind of trick." Derek held up a hand. "It's not a trick. Just come on." They followed him around the corner of the school, out of earshot of the other students. The wind blew a chill through the air, and for a moment, everything felt eerily quiet. Tarek's mind raced. What could Derek possibly want now? Why was he asking them to follow him? "Look," Derek started, once they were out of sight from the others. He looked like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words right away. This isn't easy for me to say." The twins exchanged a confused look. Derek, the guy who had always been so confident and brash, seemed to be struggling with something. For the first time, Tarek felt a flicker of sympathy, though he quickly squashed it down. Derek had made their lives difficult for far too long for him to just be forgiven. Tyler broke the silence. "Just say it, Derek. What's going on?" Derek took a deep breath, his gaze flickering nervously. "I've been a jerk. I know that. And I'm not proud of it. But there's something you guys don't know, about why I've been like this." Tarek frowned. "What are you talking about?" Derek's eyes darted to the ground, his voice lowering. "I've been dealing with some stuff at home. My parents, they're not like your parents. They don't care. I mean, they don't care about anything. They fight all the time. They don't even talk to me unless they're telling me how I'm not good enough or how I need to be someone I'm not. It's like, nothing I do is ever good enough for them." Tyler stepped forward, his expression softening. "So, you've been taking it out on us because you're hurting?" Derek didn't meet his gaze. "Yeah. I guess so. I've been angry. All the time. And it's not right, what I did to you guys. I know that now. But I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know who to talk to. And instead of figuring it out, I just took it out on the easiest targets." For a long moment, the twins stood there, processing his words. Tarek wasn't sure how to react. Part of him felt relief, maybe this was the apology they had been waiting for. But another part of him felt betrayed, as if Derek was trying to explain away his actions rather than take full responsibility. "Derek," Tarek started, his voice calm but firm, "what you did to us, it wasn't just some random bullying. It had consequences. It's not just about your family situation. You made us feel like we didn't belong here. You made us feel worthless." Derek's face flushed with shame. "I get that. I really do. And I'm sorry. I'm not asking for you to forgive me right now. I just wanted you to understand why I've been the way I have." Tyler crossed his arms, his tone still skeptical. "So what? You think this makes it okay? Just because things are bad at home?" "No," Derek's voice was almost a whisper now. "I'm not trying to justify it. But I want you to know that I'm not like this because of you. I've been trying to be someone I'm not. And maybe I pushed you guys to the edge because I was pushing myself to the edge. I don't know." For a moment, the silence hung between them. The twins stood there, digesting what Derek had just revealed. It wasn't an easy pill to swallow. They had spent so long building up walls around themselves to shield from Derek's cruelty, only to find out there had been more to the story. Tarek glanced at Tyler, who looked as conflicted as he felt. "We get that you're going through a tough time, Derek. But that doesn't give you the right to treat us, or anyone else, the way you did. Derek nodded, his face full of regret. I know. And I'll never make excuses for it. But if you'll let me, I want to try to make things right. The twins stood in silence for a moment. They weren't sure what to make of this sudden turn of events. Derek, the guy who had made their lives miserable for months, was apologizing. Part of them wanted to hold on to their anger, to push him away and not accept the apology. But another part of them recognized the courage it took to face them like this and admit his faults. Tyler was the first to speak. It's gonna take time, Derek. We're not gonna forget everything, but if you really mean it, maybe there's a chance for things to change. Tarek nodded. Yeah. But it's on you. If you want to make things right, you've got to show us. Words are one thing, but actions speak louder. Derek's expression softened, a flicker of hope lighting up his eyes. I'll prove it. I'll show you. I know I've got a lot of work to do, but I'm willing to try. As the twins turned to walk away, the weight of what had just happened settled in. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected Derek to open up like this. But as they walked toward their car, they realized something important: standing up for themselves had led them to this point. Not just with Derek, but with everything. They had taken the first step toward healing, not just from the bullying, but from all the pain they had carried for so long. Things weren't perfect. Far from it. But they had reached a turning point. And that made all the difference. After Derek's unexpected apology, things at school became different. Not immediately better, but different. The atmosphere around the twins shifted, like the air after a heavy storm had passed, calmer, but still thick with the memory of the storm. People were talking, not in the usual whispering way, but in a way that felt like they were trying to understand what had just happened. Derek, for his part, seemed sincere in his desire to make things right. He kept his distance for the most part, but when their paths crossed in the hallways, there was no sneer or snide remark. Instead, he nodded politely, almost as if waiting for them to acknowledge him. And for the first time in months, Tarek and Tyler didn't feel like they were walking on eggshells. They still didn't trust Derek completely, but the change in his behavior gave them something to hold on to, a spark of hope. For the next few days, the twins kept their distance, not knowing exactly what to do with Derek's sudden attempt at redemption. They didn't owe him forgiveness, not yet. But they also didn't want to be the ones to shut him down completely. So, they kept to their usual routine, going to class, meeting up with friends, and trying to live their lives while the memory of Derek's words lingered like an open question. It was on a Tuesday afternoon, a week after the conversation in the schoolyard, that things began to change again. The twins were sitting in the cafeteria, unpacking their lunch, when they saw Derek walk in. His presence wasn't as commanding as before, but there was something about him now that made people turn their heads. He was no longer the untouchable figure at the center of his group, but he was still Derek, the guy people paid attention to. The tension in the room was palpable, as if everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Derek walked over to where Tarek and Tyler were sitting. The cafeteria was noisy, but there was a noticeable hush around them. The twins didn't even look up at first, pretending to be absorbed in their lunch. "Hey," Derek said quietly. His voice was different now, softer, and for a moment, Tarek wasn't sure how to respond. The old Derek would have been demanding attention or making a joke at their expense. But now, it was almost like he was unsure. Tyler looked up first. "What's up, Derek?" His tone was neutral, not welcoming but not hostile either. Derek hesitated. "I was wondering if, maybe we could talk. Just the three of us." Tarek shot Tyler a glance, unsure of what to make of this. They hadn't agreed to anything with Derek. Sure, he'd apologized, but that didn't mean everything was instantly fixed. "Talk about what?" Tarek asked cautiously, putting down his sandwich. He didn't want to assume that Derek's intentions had changed, but he didn't want to dismiss him either. Derek sighed, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "Look, I know I've messed up. But I want to make things right. I was hoping we could maybe start over. I want to show you guys that I'm not the person I was. That I can be better." Tarek and Tyler exchanged another look. This wasn't the Derek they had known, not by a long shot. The old Derek would have scoffed at the idea of trying to make things right. But this Derek seemed genuine. "You want to make things right?" Tyler asked, raising an eyebrow. "It's gonna take more than a couple of words, you know." "I know." Derek's gaze dropped to the table, his expression serious. "I'm not asking for everything to be perfect overnight. I'm asking for a chance to show you that I can do better. I know I've got a lot of work to do. But I'm willing to put in the effort. If you'll let me." There was a long pause. Tarek felt the weight of the moment hanging over them. Derek was laying it all out on the table, opening himself up in a way that didn't come easily. This wasn't about a quick fix. He wasn't asking for their forgiveness immediately, he was asking for the opportunity to prove that he could change. "I'll admit it," Tarek said finally, breaking the silence. "You've got a long way to go. But I'm willing to see if you can actually do this. No promises, though." Tyler nodded in agreement. "We're not going to pretend everything's fine, but if you really mean what you said, then we'll give you a chance to prove it." Derek's face softened, and a small, almost tentative smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Thanks. I won't let you down." As Derek turned to leave, the twins watched him walk away. They didn't feel elated, but they didn't feel angry either. It was a strange, uncertain feeling, like the first steps of a long journey towards something unknown. The fact that Derek had come to them, not with a demand for forgiveness but with a humble request, had made an impact. It was a start. That's all they could ask for. But the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Derek wasn't the only one who had to change. Tarek and Tyler had to learn to trust again, to let go of the anger and hurt that had built up over the years. And that was going to take time. Over the next few days, Derek made a conscious effort to be different. He didn't seek them out, but he did make small gestures, holding the door open for them, offering a quiet nod in the hallway, and, most notably, refraining from any of his usual snide remarks. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Still, Tarek couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Derek had apologized, but there was something about the way he acted around the other students that made him wonder. He still had his old friends, still carried that weight of influence in the school. Derek might have been trying to change for them, but was he really changing for himself? That night, as Tarek lay in bed, he replayed the events of the day in his mind. Could they trust Derek? Could they believe in his attempt at redemption? The more he thought about it, the more uncertain he felt. Change wasn't something that happened overnight. And while he had seen some signs of Derek's effort, there was still that lingering question, was it enough? The answer, Tarek realized, would only come with time. They had agreed to give Derek a chance. But how long would that chance last? How much longer before the facade cracked and the old Derek resurfaced? Time would tell. But for now, they could only move forward, one step at a time. The days that followed were filled with an uneasy peace. The school had returned to its usual rhythm, but there was a subtle undercurrent of change. Derek had made it clear that he was trying to be different, but for Tarek and Tyler, it was hard to completely let go of the past. Every time Derek walked by them in the hallway, they couldn't help but remember the hurtful things he had said to them. But still, they kept their distance, watching from the sidelines as Derek navigated his newfound humility. Tyler, more skeptical than his twin, couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Derek's apology wasn't enough. It had been too easy. Too sudden. Sure, Derek had been open with them, but had he truly changed? Tyler couldn't help but wonder if Derek was simply tired of the consequences of his actions and was looking for a way to return to the same position of power he had held before. Tarek, on the other hand, was more willing to believe in the possibility of change. He had seen the shift in Derek's behavior, how he no longer laughed at their expense or tried to undermine them in front of others. But despite his inclination to trust people, even Tariq couldn't fully shake the doubts lingering in his mind. As the days turned into weeks, the twins settled into a fragile routine. They continued to interact with Derek, but it was always on the edge of their comfort zones. They kept their conversations brief, never truly allowing themselves to get too close to him. It was as if they were walking on a tightrope, carefully balancing the desire for peace with the weight of past betrayals. It was one afternoon, as they were walking to the parking lot after school, when everything came to a head. Derek was there again, waiting by the gate as if he had been expecting them. His posture was relaxed, but there was an edge to his expression. When he saw the twins, his eyes flickered with something almost unreadable. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" Derek's voice was hesitant, almost apologetic, but also determined. Tyler raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. "What now?" Tariq, ever the peacemaker, stepped forward before his brother could say anything else. "Sure. What's up?" Derek looked around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. "I know this is gonna sound weird, but I need to tell you something. Something I've been holding back for a while." The twins exchanged another wary glance. Derek had been trying to rebuild his reputation, but now he looked genuinely worried. His shoulders were tense, his hands fidgeting as if he didn't know how to say what he needed to say. "What's going on, Derek?" Tariq asked, his voice calm but with a hint of concern. Derek looked over his shoulder again before speaking in a low voice. "I didn't tell you everything last time. The stuff with my parents, it's not just that they don't care. It's worse than that. They're abusive. Not just emotionally, but physically too." The words hit the twins like a punch to the gut. Tariq's heart clenched, and Tyler's expression softened, though he still kept a guarded distance. "You're saying?" Tyler trailed off, not sure what to say. Derek nodded, his face pale. "I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want to be seen as weak. But it's been going on for a while now. My dad, he gets angry over the smallest things. And when he does, he doesn't stop until he's taken it out on me. My mom, she's not any better. She's always putting me down, telling me I'm nothing." Tariq's breath caught in his throat. He didn't know what to say. How could he have known? How could anyone have known the pain Derek had been hiding? And yet, it made sense now. All the anger. All the bitterness. It wasn't about them, it was about a boy who had never known love or support at home, only fear and rejection. Tyler, though still processing the information, spoke up. "Derek, that's really messed up. I don't know what to say. But you can't keep using it as an excuse to hurt other people." Derek's eyes flickered with a mix of shame and frustration. "I know. I didn't mean to hurt you guys. But I didn't know how to deal with everything. It's like I'm stuck in this cycle, and I don't know how to get out. I lashed out at you because you were the closest targets. And now." He paused, his voice breaking slightly. "Now I'm just tired of it. Tired of pretending that I'm okay when I'm not." There was a long silence between the three of them. The weight of Derek's confession hung in the air, heavy and raw. Tariq could feel the guilt creeping in. How many times had he wanted to be angry with Derek, to take revenge for everything that had been said and done? But in that moment, he realized something: Derek wasn't just a bully anymore. He was a person who had been living in a prison of his own. A person who had been fighting battles no one could see, hiding scars no one knew about. Tyler finally let out a breath, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm not saying you're off the hook, Derek. But I get it. I get why you were the way you were. And I'm not saying it's okay. But I think we can understand now. We'll help, if you want to get out of this mess. But you have to make the decision. You have to choose to stop using it as an excuse." Derek's eyes were wide, his voice barely above a whisper. I want to change. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to be angry all the time. Tarek stepped forward, placing a hand on Derek's shoulder, a gesture of understanding. Then we'll help you. But you have to ask for it. You have to ask for the help you need, and you have to keep fighting to be better. Derek nodded, a mix of gratitude and disbelief in his eyes. I will. I'll do whatever it takes. The twins watched as Derek stood there, for the first time in a long while, looking vulnerable, but also determined. It wasn't the end of the road, not by a long shot. The road ahead would be difficult, full of setbacks and challenges. But in that moment, Tarek and Tyler realized something important. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to let go of the past and give someone the chance to change. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened, it was about moving forward, together. As they walked away, side by side, there was a sense of quiet understanding between them. They didn't know how things would turn out with Derek. But they were willing to find out, one step at a time. Word travels fast in high school. Even when no one says anything out loud, somehow, through glances, whispers, and the silent shift of social energy, everyone knows. By the end of the week, students had picked up on something. Derek wasn't the same, and neither were the twins. Some noticed the lack of tension between them. Others noticed that Derek's usual posse no longer followed him around with the same blind loyalty. It didn't take long for the rumors to start. Did you hear Derek apologize to the twins? Nah, no way. He probably got caught doing something and had to. Maybe he's just trying to get attention again. Classic Derek. Derek had gone from the untouchable guy with the sharp tongue to someone people were openly questioning. It was strange to witness. He wasn't being mocked, not yet, but the shift was obvious. His old friends, especially Jordan and Mike, didn't like what they were seeing. Tyler spotted it first, during lunch. Derek was sitting at a different table than usual, alone. His former crew sat on the opposite end of the cafeteria, laughing loudly, like they were trying to prove a point. Tyler nudged Tarek and nodded toward him. You seeing this? Tarek looked over, a pang of something, sympathy maybe, hitting him. Yeah. Guess his friends aren't too happy about him changing. Good, Tyler muttered, picking at his food. Now he knows what it feels like. Tarek didn't say anything. Part of him agreed. But another part, the part that had always tried to believe people could grow, felt uneasy. Change was hard enough without the world turning its back on you. Later that day, it all boiled over. Tarek and Tyler were heading to their lockers when they heard raised voices down the hall. At first, it was just noise, something they'd grown used to tuning out. But then, they recognized the voices. Derek's. And Jordan's. They rounded the corner and saw them, Jordan standing chest to chest with Derek, arms crossed, voice raised just enough to draw a crowd. You're really gonna act like you're one of them now? Jordan barked. What happened, Derek? Get soft. Derek stood his ground, though the tension in his shoulders was obvious. I'm not pretending anything. I'm just not like you anymore. Jordan scoffed. You used to have people's respect. Now you're hanging with the guys you used to clown on. You think that makes you better than us? Tarek and Tyler exchanged a glance. Students were gathering, phones out, waiting for a scene. It had been a while since anything dramatic had happened, and high school thrived on drama like bees on honey. We should step in, Tarek whispered. Tyler nodded. Yeah, before this gets ugly. They walked up calmly, planting themselves beside Derek. The crowd's attention shifted. Whispers rose. Look, Tyler said, addressing Jordan directly, we're not here for this. Whatever issue you've got, take it somewhere else. Jordan narrowed his eyes. Funny. Didn't ask for your opinion. You're getting it anyway, Tarek said. Derek's trying to change. That's more than most people can say. Jordan's gaze flicked between the three of them, and for a second, it looked like he might swing. But something in the way the twins stood, not aggressively, just firmly, made him pause. "You guys think you're heroes or something?" Jordan said with a smirk. "Man, whatever. He'll be back to his old self in no time." He turned and walked off, the crowd dispersing with him, disappointed there was no fight to record. Derek stood silent for a beat, then muttered, "Thanks." Tyler shook his head. "Don't thank us. We didn't do it for you. We just didn't want things getting worse." But despite the cold tone, there was no edge to it. Just honesty. That night, the twins sat on the roof outside their bedroom window, something they'd done since they were kids when they needed to think. The sky was clear, and the city lights flickered like far-off stars. "You think he's really gonna stick with it?" Tyler asked, staring up at the sky. Tarek took a long breath. "I don't know. I think he wants to. But wanting to change and actually doing it. Two very different things." "I guess I just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop," Tyler admitted. "Like, maybe this is all just temporary." "That's fair," Tarek said. "But look at what he's already risking. His reputation. His friends. Everything he used to care about." Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "Do you ever think we're doing the right thing by giving him a chance?" Tarek smiled faintly. "Every day. And every day I question it all over again." They both laughed softly. It felt good, being honest. It didn't solve everything, but it made the weight easier to carry. At school the next day, something small happened that meant everything. Derek walked into homeroom and saw the usual empty seat beside the twins. Normally, he would have sat somewhere else, kept a safe distance. But this time, he hesitated, then made his way over and sat down quietly. A few students noticed. One whispered. Another rolled their eyes. Tarek looked over at him and gave a small nod. And Derek smiled. It wasn't a big moment. But it was a start. No matter how much someone wants to change, the past doesn't just disappear, it lingers, waiting, like cracks beneath the surface of a wall that looks fine on the outside. And for Derek, the past was getting harder to ignore. It had been almost a month since he first approached the twins. Since then, he'd been trying. Trying to be better. Trying to distance himself from the old crowd. Trying to rebuild something more honest. But it was lonely. Most people didn't trust him. Some mocked him under their breath. A few even said it to his face. The twins noticed it too. There were fewer snide comments thrown their way, but now the hostility was more subtle, side eyes in the hallways, muttered words when they passed by. You see the way they look at us? Tyler asked one day as they left history class. Yeah, Tarek replied, but at least they're not pushing us into lockers anymore. That's a low bar, man. Still, both of them knew this wasn't about going back to normal. There wasn't a normal to go back to. Things had changed. And with change came discomfort. But then came the first real setback. It was Friday. Just past lunch. The halls were buzzing with pre-weekend energy when the twins heard it, a loud crash, followed by shouting near the back stairwell. They rushed over. What they saw stopped them cold. Derek was pinned against the wall by two guys, Mike and Trevor, both from his old crew. His backpack had been dumped out, books and papers scattered across the floor. You think you're better than us now? Trevor barked. Mike shoved him again. Running around with the twins like you're some kind of saint. Derek didn't fight back. His arms stayed down. His face was red, not from fear, but from holding back. He didn't look scared. He looked ashamed. Tarek didn't wait. He stepped in fast, grabbing Trevor's shoulder. Back off. Tyler was right behind him. Unless you're dying to explain this to Coach O'Brien. The two bullies hesitated. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by the twins. For a second, it looked like they might throw a punch, but then a teacher's voice echoed from down the hall. "Hey! What's going on over there?" Mike and Trevor muttered something and took off. Derek sank to the floor, breathing hard. "You good?" Tarek asked. "Yeah," Derek said, voice rough. "Thanks." "You didn't fight back," Tyler pointed out, crouching beside him. Derek gave a half-smile. "Didn't want to prove them right." It hit the twins all at once, Derek was really trying. He was outnumbered, outcast, and out of chances, and he still chose not to sink back into who he used to be. They helped him pick up his stuff in silence. Later that day, the three of them sat behind the bleachers after practice, a place the twins used to hang out alone. Now, it felt different. Like a space they could share. Derek broke the silence. "I used to be like them. Worse, even. And now it's like I'm getting everything I gave out. Like karma." Tarek leaned back on his elbows. "You are. But you're also taking it. That counts for something. You ever think it's not worth it?" Derek asked. "Like, maybe I should have just stayed who I was. At least then I had people." Tyler looked at him for a long second. "Yeah. We've thought that too. About a lot of things. But then we remember why we started standing up in the first place. And why's that? Because we got tired of hating ourselves for letting it happen." That quiet truth sat between them for a while. No one rushed to speak. The late afternoon sun dipped behind the school building, casting long shadows across the field. Derek finally said, "I don't hate myself for changing. I hate that it took me so long to see things clearly." "That's part of it," Tarek said. "Owning it. Doing something about it." There was a peace in that moment. But also a question, how long would this peace last? The weekend passed uneventfully, but by Monday morning, the school halls were buzzing with something new, photos. Someone had posted a pic of the confrontation from Friday. Derek getting shoved. The twins stepping in. It had gone up on social media, tagged with a snide caption. "Guess bullies cry too." The comments were brutal. Some students laughed. Others called Derek weak. A few anonymous accounts posted worse. The three of them saw it before first period. Derek didn't say anything. He stared at the screen, jaw clenched. "You okay?" Tarek asked. "No," Derek said honestly. "But I'm not backing down." "Then neither are we," Tyler added. The three of them walked into school side by side. It didn't stop the whispers. It didn't stop the comments. But it made a statement. They weren't going anywhere. The days following the photo post were some of the hardest yet. Derek walked through the halls with a silent determination, but it was clear the online backlash had stung. Even without saying anything, it showed in the way he kept his head low, how he avoided eye contact, how he hesitated before walking into a room. But there was something else, too, something more important. He kept showing up. That, in itself, was a quiet act of defiance. The twins noticed. And so did others. It started small. One morning, as Derek walked into the cafeteria, a sophomore named Sam, someone who had once laughed at his jokes when they were at other people's expense, gave him a quick nod. Not friendly, not warm, but respectful. Later that day, during English, a girl named Mia, who'd always kept her distance from drama, moved her chair closer when Derek sat down near her table. She didn't say much, but she didn't move away either. The shift wasn't dramatic. No one came running to Derek with open arms. But the wall of isolation that had surrounded him since his apology was beginning to crack. And the reason was simple. He kept choosing to do the right thing, even when it was the hard thing. During gym class on Wednesday, Coach O'Brien split the students into basketball teams. Usually, the twins ended up on the same side, but this time, they were split, Tarek on one side with Derek, Tyler on the other. It was a clean, fast-paced game. No trash talk. No cheap fouls. Just basketball. And something surprising happened. Derek played with them like a teammate. Not a showboat, not trying to prove himself, just a guy passing, defending, and calling out plays. Tarek caught himself almost forgetting everything that had happened in the past. On the court, at least for those 20 minutes, they were just kids playing the game they loved. After the final whistle blew, Coach O'Brien nodded at Derek. "Nice hustle." Derek blinked, then gave a short nod back. It was the first time any adult at school had acknowledged him in a positive way since everything started. As they walked off the court, Tarek clapped Derek on the shoulder. "You played smart out there." Derek grinned. "You're just mad I passed you." "Please. I let you have that one." The laugh that followed was small, but real. Tyler, walking nearby, heard it too. He didn't say anything, but he smiled quietly to himself. It wasn't forgiveness. Not entirely. But it was something. That night, the twins sat in their room working on homework when Tyler broke the silence. "You think people are starting to come around?" Tarek looked up from his notebook. "Some, yeah. Not everyone. But that's not really the point." "What is the point then?" Tarek leaned back in his chair, thinking. "That he's still standing. After everything. That takes guts." Tyler nodded slowly. "Yeah. It does." Then he added, almost like an afterthought, still keeping one eye open, though. Tarek smirked. "Same." By Friday, something unexpected happened. Ms. Reynolds, their history teacher, pulled the three of them aside after class. "I just wanted to say. I've noticed a change. In all of you. It's not easy standing up when it's uncomfortable. Or giving someone a second chance when they've hurt you. But that's what real strength looks like." Tarek and Tyler exchanged a glance. Derek just nodded, visibly moved. "I'm proud of you," she added. "All of you." It was the kind of affirmation they didn't realize they'd been needing, someone outside the storm acknowledging their growth. That weekend, they did something none of them had expected just a few weeks earlier: they hung out. It was low-key, just video games and pizza at the twins' house. But it felt like a turning point. The tension that had existed between them had thinned into something more like cautious friendship. As they played a racing game, Tyler leaned over and said, "If you crash one more time, you're banned from Mario Kart forever." Derek laughed. "Man, I'm trying." "You're trying wrong." Tarek chimed in. "Let him be. It's the first time he's driven anything without crashing into a wall, emotionally or otherwise." They all laughed, and the moment hung there, light, genuine, unexpected. Later that night, as Derek got ready to leave, he stood at the door for a long second. "Thanks for inviting me," he said. "I haven't had a night like this in a while. Maybe ever." Tyler looked at him. "You earned it. Not overnight. But you're showing up. That matters." Derek gave a quiet nod. "I'm gonna keep showing up." Tarek stepped forward, offering a fist bump. "Then we'll keep watching." Derek bumped fists with both of them, then headed out into the night. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? No matter how far you move forward, the past has a way of circling back, testing whether you've really changed or just learned how to hide better. And for Derek, that test came on a rainy Monday morning. It started with a whisper. Then a rumor. Then a screenshot. By the end of first period, it was everywhere. Someone had posted old text messages, screenshots from a group chat Derek had been in months ago. Messages filled with cruel jokes, slurs, and awful things that had been said about the twins and other students. And they were real. The group chat was from back when Derek was still that guy, ruthless, loud, and full of anger. Even Derek didn't deny it. He knew exactly when those messages had been sent. He remembered typing every one of them. But that version of him felt so far away now. He barely recognized the words. Still, there they were, circulating like wildfire, dragging him back into a version of himself he was trying desperately to bury. During third period, the school felt like a pressure cooker. Whispers turned into stares. Some students who had started warming up to Derek now gave him a wide berth. Teachers didn't say anything, but the air felt tense. Tarek and Tyler found out just after lunch, when Jordan walked by their table with a smug grin and said, "Guess some people don't change after all." They didn't even look at him. Tarek pulled out his phone, saw the screenshots, and froze. Tyler scrolled through them quietly, his jaw tightening. The messages were awful. Racist slurs. Personal insults. Laughing at people's pain. Derek at his worst. And they were public now. Tyler slammed his phone down. He said he changed. But this? This wasn't a slip-up. This was who he really was. Tarek said nothing. Because deep down, a part of him agreed. They didn't see Derek until later that day. He was sitting alone in the art room, headphones on, staring blankly at a sketchbook. He wasn't drawing. He wasn't doing anything. Just sitting. Tarek stepped inside first. Tyler stayed at the door, arms crossed. Derek looked up, eyes tired. "I guess you saw it." "Yeah," Tarek said quietly. There was a long silence. Then Derek nodded, closed the sketchbook, and said, "They're real. I won't lie." Tyler stepped forward now. "You don't get to say that like it's no big deal." "I'm not," Derek said, his voice raw. "I'm not trying to downplay it. I wrote those things. I was angry. I wanted to feel powerful. I thought hurting people meant I was strong." "Why didn't you tell us those messages existed?" Tyler asked. "Because I was ashamed," Derek admitted. "I was hoping they'd stay buried, like if I changed fast enough, they wouldn't matter." Tarek finally spoke. "But they do matter." "I know." Another pause. Derek looked at them both. "I don't expect you to trust me after this. Or even talk to me. I get it. But I'm not going to run away. Not again." The hurt in his voice wasn't performative. It was real. And that's what made it harder. Tarek stared at him. "What are you going to do now?" "Own it," Derek said. "If I'm serious about changing, then I have to take everything that comes with it, even if it costs me everything." Tyler looked at him for a long time, then said, "Good. Because it might." And with that, the twins walked out. The next day, Derek went to the school office on his own. He requested to speak during the morning announcements. The administration was hesitant, but he convinced them. At 9 a.m., Derek's voice came on over the loudspeaker. "This is Derek Miller. Some of you saw the screenshots that got posted yesterday. I wrote those messages. Every one of them. I'm not going to make excuses. What I said was wrong. It was disgusting. And I'm sorry." The school was silent. "I also want to say this, I know some of you won't accept my apology. That's okay. You have every right not to. But I'm not going to disappear, and I'm not going to pretend that version of me didn't exist. I've hurt people. Some of them forgave me. Some probably never will. But I'm still here. I'm still working on being better. That's all I can do." Then the announcement clicked off. No one clapped. No one cheered. But no one laughed either. In the days that followed, Derek became a ghost in the halls. Not ignored, but watched. Some kids looked at him with disgust. Some with curiosity. And a few, just a few, looked at him like maybe, just maybe, they saw something different. Tarek and Tyler watched from a distance. They didn't sit with Derek. Didn't walk to class with him. They needed space to process. But on Thursday afternoon, after gym, Tarek found Derek sitting on the bleachers alone. "Hey," he said. Derek looked up, surprised. "I'm not here to fix anything," Tarek said. "And I'm still mad. Hurt, too. I know. But I saw what you did. That announcement. That took guts." Derek swallowed. "Thanks." Tarek sat down beside him, not close, but not far. "We're watching," Tarek said. "Not walking away. But not jumping in either. That's fair." Tyler walked by a few minutes later, paused, then sat on the other side of Derek. No words. Just presence. It wasn't trust. Not yet. But it was still something. By the time the weekend rolled around, everything had quieted down, at least on the surface. But inside, the tension hadn't disappeared. It had just shifted, deeper, heavier, more complicated. Tarek sat alone in his room Saturday morning, staring at an old notebook he'd kept since sophomore year. Inside were pages of scribbles, lyrics, and thoughts he hadn't shared with anyone, not even Tyler. Some were full of anger. Others, confusion. A few were direct responses to the names and slurs Derek had once hurled at him. Now, those words had come back to haunt them all. But something was different now. Tarek turned to a blank page and wrote. "Some lines can't be erased. But maybe, just maybe, they can be rewritten." He didn't know what it meant yet. But it felt important. Meanwhile, Tyler was across town, at a local park court, shooting hoops alone. It was how he cleared his head. The sound of the ball bouncing against the pavement had a rhythm to it, one that steadied his thoughts when everything else felt out of sync. He kept replaying Derek's voice over the loudspeaker in his mind. That apology hadn't fixed anything. But it was honest. And maybe even rare. Still, Tyler struggled. He couldn't stop hearing the words from those messages. Reading them had been like being punched all over again, except this time, it came with the knowledge that Derek had willingly typed them, laughed about them. People don't change that much, do they? As he paused to catch his breath, he saw someone walking toward him. It was Derek. Tyler didn't say anything. Just kept dribbling. Derek stopped a few feet away. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "I come here to be alone," Tyler replied. "I can leave." There was a pause. Then Tyler sighed. "No. Stay. Just, don't talk for a minute." So they played, wordlessly, one-on-one. No scoreboard, no taunts, just movement and sweat and silence. After 20 minutes, both were winded. Derek leaned against the chain-link fence, breathing hard. Tyler finally said, "Why did you say those things?" Derek looked down. "Because I thought it made me powerful. I thought hurting people gave me control." He looked up. "I was wrong." Tyler stared at him. "And now? Now I realize I was the weakest guy in the room. I just didn't know it yet." The court was silent for a beat. Tyler passed him the ball. "Best way to prove you've changed isn't by saying it." Derek nodded. "It's by showing it. Every day." Monday came, and the mood at school had shifted again, just slightly. Whispers had faded. Most students had moved on to the next drama. But the ones who mattered, the ones who were watching, still carried questions. That week, Derek started spending his free period volunteering in Ms. Reynolds' classroom, helping organize books and tutoring kids who were struggling in history. He didn't make a big deal about it. Didn't post it on social media or try to make it look like a redemption arc. He just showed up and did the work. And little by little, the walls began to lower. One afternoon, Tariq walked past the classroom and saw Derek patiently explaining the Civil War to a freshman who clearly hated history. The kid was actually nodding along. Tariq paused for a second, watching. Then he kept walking. By Thursday, something unexpected happened. The principal announced that the school would be holding an open mic night, an idea started by the student council to give people a chance to share poems, music, or stories about identity, resilience, and change. Tariq felt something spark in him when he heard the announcement. He had something to say. Something that had been building for a while. That night, he pulled out his old notebook again. And he started writing. Friday came fast. The open mic night was set up in the library, lights low, fairy lights strung around the shelves. Students filed in slowly, some with papers in hand, others just curious. Tyler and Derek sat in the back row. Tariq stood near the front, pacing quietly with a folded sheet of paper in his hand. When his name was called, he walked to the mic, took a breath, and began. They say time heals, but time forgets. Words linger longer than fists. I carried those names in my chest like rusted chains. But somehow, I still breathe. Some people break you. Others try to rebuild you. Sometimes, it's the same person. There was a stillness in the room. I'm not here to forgive. Not yet. I'm here to speak. And sometimes, that's enough. He finished, and silence followed, then soft, genuine applause. Tyler stood. Then, surprisingly, Derek did too. And they clapped together. The weekend after open mic night felt different. Not lighter. Not easier. But clearer. There was a shift, not just between the boys, but in the air around them. It was like everyone in school had been holding their breath for weeks, waiting to see what would happen next. And after Tariq's performance, they started to exhale. Nobody forgot what Derek had done. No one should. But something had changed. He wasn't invisible anymore. On Sunday morning, the twins' mom made pancakes, and for the first time in a while, the kitchen felt calm. No tension. No side glances. Just warm food, quiet music, and the smell of cinnamon in the air. "Y'all been quiet lately," she said as she flipped a pancake. "That usually means something's brewing." Tariq and Tyler looked at each other. "It's been a lot," Tyler admitted. Tariq added, "But maybe it's heading somewhere better." She turned around and gave them a look only a mom could. Better doesn't mean easy. It means worth it. They nodded. Neither had anything to add. But they understood. Monday brought more than just classes. It brought a test neither of them expected. A hallway fight. Not Derek's. Not theirs. It was a freshman. A quiet kid named Marcus, black, shy, always reading manga in the library. He'd been cornered by two older students who thought it was funny to mock the way he spoke, the clothes he wore. It got ugly fast. They pushed him. Called him names. One of them knocked the books out of his hands. And then, without thinking, Tyler stepped in. "Yo. Enough." The hallway froze. The bullies turned toward him, eyes narrowing. "What's it to you?" Tariq was there in seconds, already pulling out his phone. "Say another word, and this video's on 3 platforms before the bell rings." That did it. The bullies muttered curses and backed off, melting into the crowd. Marcus stood frozen, his face red. "You okay?" Tyler asked. Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. "Yeah. Thanks." Tariq picked up his books. "You don't owe us anything. Just remember this moment, though. Next time it's someone else." Marcus blinked. "I will." Word spread quickly. Not about the bullies. But about the twins stepping in again, this time not for themselves, and not even for a friend. Just because it was right. Derek heard about it after third period. He didn't say anything right away. But that afternoon, he caught up with the twins behind the gym. "I heard what happened," he said. "That was brave." Tarek shrugged. "It wasn't brave. It was overdue." Tyler nodded. "People watched us get dragged for too long without saying anything. We're not letting that cycle keep spinning." Derek looked at them, something stirring in his voice. "I want in." Tarek raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I want to help," Derek said. "I've done enough damage. Maybe it's time I start repairing what I can." Tyler didn't speak right away. But he didn't shut him down either. Instead, he said, "Then show up. No speeches. Just actions." Derek nodded. "I will." That week, the three of them did something bold. They met with Ms. Reynolds and proposed a project, one that could shift the way students talked about identity, inclusion, and accountability. They called it Project Mirror. A student-led workshop that would use art, writing, and real conversation to reflect on experiences at school, the good, the bad, and the silenced. Ms. Reynolds was quiet as she listened. Then she smiled. "You boys aren't playing small anymore." "We can't," Tarek said. "Not if we want things to change," Derek added. She leaned forward. "I'll back you. But you need to be ready for pushback. From students. From parents. Even staff." Tyler looked her in the eye. "We've already survived worse." Word spread again, but this time, it wasn't scandal. It was something new. A flyer posted on lockers. "Project Mirror, your story matters. Join us. Share. Listen. Reflect. No judgment. Just truth." It stirred curiosity. Some mocked it, sure. "Oh great, now the guilt trip tour begins," someone said in the cafeteria. But others leaned in. A girl named Jess, who had dealt with bullying because of her stutter, signed up first. Then Marcus. Then Mia. Then others followed. Within days, there were over 20 names on the list. And the twins realized something, the pain they'd carried all this time. They weren't the only ones holding it. The school wasn't broken because of a few bad people. It was broken because for too long, too many good ones stayed silent. Now, that silence was starting to crack. One night, the twins and Derek sat on the roof of Tyler and Tarek's house, just watching the stars. "I used to think the world was out to get me," Derek said. "Like, every time something went wrong, it proved I was alone." Tarek leaned back. "Same. But then I realized, when people try to break you, it's usually because they're scared of what you represent." "Scared of what?" Derek asked. Tyler replied, "Power that isn't theirs. Confidence they don't understand. And truth that forces them to look in the mirror," Tarek added. Derek smiled. "Then maybe it's time the whole school takes a good look." They sat in silence, the stars above them sharp and endless. The storm had passed. But its marks. They remained. And those marks were beginning to mean something. They were a map. The first Project Mirror session was held in the library after school on a Thursday. No one knew exactly what to expect. The lights were dimmed, not to make things dramatic, but to make it feel safer. Softer. Less like a classroom, more like a circle. Chairs were arranged in a wide loop. No desks. No podiums. Just space. Tarek, Tyler, and Derek sat at the edge of the circle, not in charge, just there like everyone else. No one wore name tags. No one passed out rules. There were only two guidelines, written in soft ink on a board near the door. 1. Speak your truth. 2. Listen with respect. 22 students showed up. That alone was enough to call it a win. Some walked in nervously, arms crossed. Others came in pairs, whispering to each other, unsure if they were about to hear a lecture, a group therapy session, or some weird school club experiment. Tariq stood and welcomed them all with something simple. No one's here to fix you. No one's here to fix anything, really. We're here to be real. That's it. Then he sat down. And they waited. For a full minute, the circle was silent. Until Marcus, the same kid they'd stepped in to protect weeks before, spoke first. I used to think the reason people picked on me was because I wasn't tough enough. That if I just acted different, I'd be okay. But now I get that some people pick targets, not because the targets are weak, but because they shine where those people don't. His voice was small, but steady. That shine made them uncomfortable. And that's not my problem anymore. A few heads nodded. Someone whispered, facts. And the silence cracked. Next, Mia shared. Last year, I was scared to walk home alone. Not because of my neighborhood, but because I didn't want to hear another comment about what I was wearing. Or how I looked. People think it's harmless. It's not. Then Jess, with her stutter steady but full of power. Teachers used to cut me off mid-sentence. Students too. Like my voice wasn't worth the wait. Like fluency mattered more than meaning. Then a guy from the wrestling team, James, big, tough, silent, spoke for the first time anyone could remember. My dad always said crying was for the weak. I haven't cried in 6 years. But I feel like I've been holding my breath that whole time. And then. Derek. He didn't stand. Just sat forward and looked at the floor as he spoke. There are people in this room I hurt. Some directly. Some by being silent when others did. I can't take that back. I know that. But I want you to know, when I speak now, it's not as the guy I used to be. It's the guy who sees the damage, and wants to be part of the repair. Nobody clapped. But nobody walked out. And that said more than applause ever could. After that night, something subtle began to ripple through the school. Not a revolution. Not some huge shift. But people started talking more honestly, in hallways, over lunch, in classrooms. Some teachers even pulled the twins aside to ask if they could attend the next Project Mirror as observers. Only if you're ready to listen, Tyler said. Not led, Tariq added. The teachers nodded. They understood. By the time the second session happened, the group had grown. 30 students. A few brave teachers. One assistant principal. And stories kept coming. There were poems. Personal essays. Quiet confessions. One girl spoke about being the only Latina in her AP class and how invisible that made her feel. A boy talked about being the only openly gay kid in the school and the weight of having to represent all the time. It wasn't perfect. Some students said too much. Others struggled to say anything at all. There were tears, long pauses, even a few raw silences no one knew how to break. But they showed up. And that meant everything. After the third session, Derek stayed behind to help stack chairs. Ms. Reynolds walked in, watching him quietly. You remind me of someone, she said. He looked up. Yeah. She nodded. Someone who used to speak without thinking. Someone who needed to learn how to carry his own words. He gave a small smile. You think I've learned that? I think you're learning, she said. And that's all we can ask. Then she added, you're not the same boy who sat in detention, angry at the world. Derek looked down. That boy still lives in here. I just don't give him the mic anymore. Ms. Reynolds smiled. Good. Keep it that way. Later that night, back at the twins' house, Tyler sat on the porch while Tariq journaled beside him. You think this project's actually working? Tyler asked. Tarek paused. It's not about fixing the whole school. Then what? It's about giving people a room where they don't have to pretend. Tyler thought about that. Then nodded. That's worth showing up for. By the start of the fourth Project Mirror session, the library chairs were no longer enough. 43 students showed up. 5 teachers. 1 school counselor. And for the first time, someone from the district office, just sitting in the back, quietly observing. Something was happening. Not big. Not flashy. But real. What started as a few students speaking up had started to spread. Not like gossip, but like a signal. A quiet understanding that this school, their school, might finally be listening. That they didn't have to shrink anymore just to fit in. That maybe, just maybe, their stories were starting to walk on their own. That same week, a group of students, some from Project Mirror, others just watching from afar, came together and painted a mural in the school's inner courtyard. They didn't ask for permission. Just started showing up after school with brushes and ideas. At first, it was just color blocks. Abstract shapes. But by Friday, it turned into something more. There were silhouettes, people of different races, sizes, and genders. There were broken mirrors stitched with gold lines. At the center, the words. We are not what you whisper. We are what we choose to say out loud. The principal nearly shut it down. Graffiti isn't allowed on school property, he said, standing with arms crossed on Monday morning. But Ms. Reynolds stepped in, calm and firm. Then call it a student-led art installation. And maybe ask why they felt the need to paint it without asking first. He paused. Then turned and walked away. And the mural stayed. Meanwhile, Derek was still doing the work. Not headline-grabbing work. But real, everyday stuff. Tutoring kids in history. Cleaning up after Project Mirror meetings. Showing up to classes on time. Staying quiet when it wasn't his turn to speak. But it wasn't easy. One afternoon in the hallway, a junior brushed past him and muttered, "Fake redemption arc. We see you." Derek didn't snap. Didn't get defensive. Just looked at the kid and said, "Then keep watching." Tarek, who had heard the exchange, nodded slightly. He still wasn't best friends with Derek. But he noticed the restraint. That mattered. Tyler, meanwhile, had been building something new, a student resource board, a digital wall where people could anonymously share stories, get support, and offer help. Kind of like a confession space, but with community behind it. He launched it on a Sunday night. By Monday morning, it had 127 entries. I've been afraid to tell people I'm Muslim. Project Mirror helped me feel less alone. Someone called me too dark to be pretty in 8th grade. I never forgot it. Sometimes I feel like I only exist in this school to fill a diversity quota. There was anger. Grief. But also hope. Today, for the first time, I didn't pretend to laugh at a racist joke. Thank you to whoever stood up for me in the lunch line last week. I didn't know people like you existed here. Then came the next surprise. A teacher, Mr. Brenner, the strict math guy who rarely smiled, stood up at Project Mirror and said, "I was part of the problem. For years, I ignored things I should have confronted. I told myself I was staying neutral, but the truth is, I was just staying safe." You could hear the silence fall like a pin. From this point on, I'm not staying quiet. If I see it, I say it. If I hear it, I challenge it. And if I mess up, I want to be called out. That's my promise. Derek looked across the room and caught Tyler's gaze. Even he didn't see that coming. That week, something even stranger happened, the tension began to loosen. Not disappear, but loosen. A white student sat next to Tarek in science class and asked about Project Mirror, not in a performative way, but genuinely. Is it just about racism? He asked. Tarek replied, it's about identity. So yeah, race, but also gender, ability, class, culture. It's about not having to edit who you are to survive. The kid nodded. That sounds, kind of powerful. It is, Tarek said. But of course, not everyone liked the shift. Posters were torn down. A fake Instagram account popped up, mocking students who had spoken at mirror sessions. And someone spray-painted "woke crybabies" across the locker hall one morning. Tyler saw it first. He didn't get angry. He took a picture. Uploaded it to the community board with one sentence. We're still here. Louder than this. By the end of the day, the hallway was repainted, with help from teachers, students, and even the janitor who had watched it all unfold for years. That night, Tyler said to Tarek, the backlash means it's working. Tarek nodded. You don't fight back against things that aren't a threat. Later that week, Ms. Reynolds gathered the three of them after a meeting. I want you to know something, she said. You've shifted this school's story. People are seeing themselves differently now. That's not small. We didn't fix anything, Tyler said. You weren't supposed to, she smiled. You just made space for the truth to stand up. That's more than most adults do. Derek looked down for a second, then said, it still feels fragile. Like it could fall apart. Ms. Reynolds nodded. That's how all good things start. Fragile, but worth holding on to. For every step forward, there seemed to be someone pushing back. That was the new reality. The louder Project Mirror got, the more uncomfortable some people became. Not just students, but parents, faculty, even alumni who hadn't set foot in the school for years. The mural in the courtyard? A few called it divisive. The anonymous board? One parent labeled it a breeding ground for victimhood. And when a story from the board, a heartfelt post about being non-binary, got picked up on social media and went viral locally, things really hit a nerve. There were calls to the school board. Complaints about pushing an agenda. Demands to cancel Project Mirror entirely. The message was loud and clear, not everyone wanted to hear the truth. Principal Jacobs called a meeting. Tyler, Tarek, Derek, Ms. Reynolds, and two other teachers were asked to join. It wasn't a warm invite. The room was tense from the moment they walked in. I want to start by saying, Jacobs began, that I appreciate what this group is trying to do. But it's starting to affect the school's reputation. We've received over 30 emails in the last 2 days. Tyler leaned forward. Are they complaining about what we're doing, or just that it's being said out loud? Jacobs blinked. That's not the point. It kind of is, Ms. Reynolds chimed in. You asked for student engagement. They created a space for voices that were never heard before. That's not chaos, it's courage. Jacobs sighed. We're asking that Project Mirror pauses. Just until things calm down. Tarek looked at him, disbelief in his voice. So, the second it makes people uncomfortable, we shut it down. No one's shutting it down, Jacobs replied quickly. Just, pressing pause. Tyler stood up. Truth doesn't pause. And walked out. The story spread fast. Not because the students posted it. But because someone leaked the email about the pause request to a local journalist. Within hours, the school was on the radar again, this time, in a bigger spotlight. The headline read. Students silenced, why a high school's truth-telling program was paused mid-progress. And suddenly, people were talking. Everywhere. Some defended the school. Others defended the students. But the message was out. Project Mirror was more than just a club. It was a mirror too many were afraid to look into. That night, the twins sat on the roof again. I knew it'd be hard, Tyler said. But I didn't think they'd try to shut us down like this. Tarek replied, "They're not scared of the stories. They're scared of what those stories expose." Down below, Derek texted them. "You still in?" Tarek texted back. "Always." The next day, something unexpected happened. Students showed up to school wearing mirrors, taped to backpacks, pinned to jackets, some drawn on notebooks. No words. Just the reflection. Tyler saw it first in the hallway. A girl he didn't know had glued a tiny mirror to her lanyard. She looked at him, nodded, and kept walking. By lunch, over 100 students were wearing some kind of mirror. Derek walked in with a piece of silver tape stretched across his chest, with one word written on it. Seen. The school couldn't ban it. They tried. But the mirrors weren't disruptive. Just reflective. Literally. And symbolically. Later that week, Jacobs reversed his decision. Project Mirror could continue, but under close observation. The students didn't care about the conditions. They'd already proved the truth had legs of its own. And it wasn't going back in the box. During the next mirror session, Tarek opened with a short speech. "We thought telling our stories would fix things. It didn't. But it made something better, it woke people up. And when people wake up, they don't just speak louder. They listen harder." The room was packed. Not just with students now, but with parents, alumni, and even a school board member. This time, Tyler read something of his own. He hadn't shared before. But tonight, he did. "They told us it wasn't the time. But when is the right time to be who you are? When is the right time to stop swallowing your name? We're not asking for comfort. We're asking for space. And we made it ourselves." After the session, a senior girl walked up to Derek. "I used to hate you," she said bluntly. "Still might, a little." He didn't flinch. "Fair. But I've watched you change," she continued. "And I believe people can. So keep going. Just, don't screw it up." He smiled. "I won't." That night, Ms. Reynolds sent a text to the group chat she had started with the 3 boys months earlier. It read, "You're not just writing your story anymore. You're rewriting the schools." And for the first time in a long time, they believed it. By the time the dust from the backlash settled, something undeniable had changed. Project Mirror was no longer just a school project or a momentary trend. It had woven itself into the fabric of the school, and its effects were beginning to ripple outward, touching everyone in its wake. Not just the students who had bravely shared their voices, but the teachers, the staff, even the parents who had initially recoiled. It was as though the mirrors they had held up, both literal and metaphorical, had begun reflecting back more than anyone had anticipated. The next week, Tarek walked into English class and noticed something immediately: the classroom atmosphere was different. Normally, students barely interacted with each other beyond polite nods or whispered comments. But today, the air felt charged. People weren't just sitting in their usual corners. They were talking, actually talking. Not about the latest trend or gossip, but about their experiences. About life outside of school. About struggles that no one had dared mention before. And at the front of the class, Ms. Williams, one of the most reserved teachers, was sitting, listening. Just listening. She caught Tarek's eye and gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. Tarek knew it wasn't just the students who had changed. The teachers were, too. The impact of Project Mirror had begun to work its way into the lesson plans, the conversations, and the hallways. But for every moment of growth, there was still pushback. Not from the school officials, at least not directly. But from the general student body. There were whispers in the hallways, eye rolls in the lunchroom, and a few more passive-aggressive posts on social media. One post, in particular, caught Tyler's eye. It was a meme, posted anonymously, with the caption, "When everyone has an opinion, but nobody wants to listen." It wasn't a call for action. It was a call for silence. Tyler stared at the post for a few minutes before scrolling down and replying. When everyone has an opinion, the hardest part is hearing the truth. But we're listening. It wasn't much. But it felt like something. And it was that something that started a conversation. Within hours, the post had been shared and commented on by dozens of students. Some supportive, some critical, but all engaged. It became clear, Project Mirror wasn't just shaking up the old guard, it was challenging everyone to confront their own discomfort. Tariq had a conversation with Ms. Reynolds that afternoon. "You know what's strange," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I thought the whole point was to stop pretending. But now, it feels like people are pretending again. Just pretending to be okay with it." Ms. Reynolds nodded thoughtfully. "It's part of the process. When you ask people to face what they've been ignoring, they don't always thank you for it. But eventually, the discomfort wears off. It becomes the new norm." Tariq raised an eyebrow. "Is that supposed to be comforting?" She smiled. "It's the truth. Not everyone is going to cheer for this. But the ones who get it, they're going to help carry it forward." Derek wasn't always the most vocal. But when he did speak, it was sharp. Honest. Unapologetic. And during the next Project Mirror session, when the conversation shifted toward what comes after progress, what comes after you've started telling the truth, he spoke up. "We talk a lot about what's wrong. About how people are messed up. But we never talk about what happens next," he said. "What happens after you stop pretending, after you face all that uncomfortable stuff?" There was a pause. Tariq nodded, as if Derek had just put words to something everyone was feeling. "We rebuild," Tariq said simply. "We rebuild ourselves, our relationships, and our school. It won't be easy. But we have to build something better." The room was quiet for a moment. But not in a tense way. It was more like the quiet after a storm, when the air is still, and everything is waiting for the next move. After the session, Tyler stayed behind to help clean up. He was gathering chairs when someone tapped him on the shoulder. It was James, the big, quiet guy from the wrestling team. "I wanted to say thanks," James said, his voice low but steady. "For making this whole thing real. I'm not good at talking about, well, anything. But you made it okay to start." Tyler looked up, surprised. "You're welcome. But, I didn't make anything real." "You did. We all did." James gave a small nod. "Yeah, but you showed us how. And that's what we needed." Tyler didn't have a response to that. What do you say when someone acknowledges the weight of your words? It felt too big for a thank you. But it also felt necessary. "Take care of yourself, man," Tyler said, the words awkward but real. And for the first time, James smiled. "You too." By the following week, the school was changing in ways no one could have predicted. Students started using the mirrors in new ways, on lockers, as badges, even etched into their binders. It wasn't just about the initial act of self-expression anymore, it was about a new way of being. A few teachers, Ms. Williams, Mr. Brenner, started introducing Project Mirror into their own classrooms. Not as a subject, but as an example. "I'm not perfect," Ms. Williams said to her class. "I don't have all the answers. But I'll be honest with you if you're honest with me." It was a simple request. And it was starting to work. But even as Project Mirror grew, it wasn't without its growing pains. Some students still refused to participate. Some teachers still felt uncomfortable addressing the more personal aspects of their students' stories. And there were days when the project felt like it might unravel. But then came the next surprise: the school board called a meeting. A real one. They wanted to know more. They wanted to understand the full impact of Project Mirror and how it could be incorporated into the curriculum, permanently. For once, it wasn't a meeting to shut something down. It was a meeting to see how far the project could go. Derek, Tyler, and Tarek stood at the front of the room. Tarek spoke first, as always. Project Mirror is about creating a space where everyone can feel seen. It's about truth. About people standing up and saying, "This is me, this is who I am." Tyler spoke next. It's about breaking the silence that's been holding us back. And it's working. And Derek, who had spent most of the meeting in quiet observation, spoke last. "You can't rewrite the rules of a game unless you're willing to change how you play it," he said, his voice steady. "We're changing how this school works. Not just for us. But for everyone." By the time Project Mirror had gone from a local initiative to a movement, the ripple effect was undeniable. But with change came resistance, and the system that had long thrived on silence and conformity began to show cracks. At the next school board meeting, tensions were palpable. There was a quiet hum in the air, a sense that something big was coming. No one could ignore the momentum of Project Mirror anymore. What had begun as a small group of students finding their voices was now a school-wide phenomenon. And it was clear, the adults, those who had always been in charge, were nervous. The room was filled with parents, alumni, teachers, and students. Everyone had their eyes on the school board members, who sat like judges at the front. Principal Jacobs was there too, sitting rigidly behind them, a look of unease crossing his face as he shifted in his seat. The meeting started with formalities, but everyone knew why they were really here. The Project Mirror proposal, officially for an ongoing student-run initiative, was on the table. It had become a point of contention. Jacob stood up first, and the room went silent. His voice was steady, but there was a tension in it that hadn't been there before. "Let me start by saying that I support the students' right to express themselves. Project Mirror has certainly opened up conversations, many of which are difficult but necessary. However," he paused, looking around at the room full of people, "it's also created a divide. It has polarized our community." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement. Others, especially the students, shifted in their seats uncomfortably. Tyler, who was sitting near the back, exchanged a glance with Tarek. This was the moment. The system was showing its hand. Jacobs continued, "We need to balance the freedom of expression with the responsibilities of maintaining an environment that's conducive to learning. We've seen some students thrive, but we've also seen others become unsettled." Tyler stood up slowly. His voice was calm but firm. "Is the problem really the students speaking up? Or is it the discomfort people feel when they're forced to hear truths they'd rather ignore?" The room fell silent. Jacobs looked at Tyler, his eyes narrowing. "This isn't about discomfort. It's about the welfare of the entire school. But if discomfort is the price of progress, then maybe that's something we need to pay," Tyler said, his tone unwavering. "The fact that we've made people uncomfortable shows we've touched on something real. It's easy to pretend everything's fine when no one talks about what's wrong." Tarek joined in. "This is about our right to be seen, to be heard. We don't get to rewrite our stories if we can't even talk about them." The room was divided. On one side, parents and faculty members who had been quiet during the meeting now began to murmur in agreement. On the other side, there were those who seemed agitated by the boldness of the students' statements. But the most unexpected response came from a parent, one who had been quietly taking notes throughout the meeting. Mrs. Rodriguez, a mother of 2 children at the school, stood up and walked to the front. "I'm not here to make a speech," she said, addressing the board. "But I am here to say that my daughter has been changed by this project. She came home the other day and told me about her experience in Project Mirror, and for the first time, I saw a confidence in her I haven't seen in years." There was a collective pause. Mrs. Rodriguez was a well-respected figure in the school community, someone whose opinion held weight. "I wasn't sure about it at first," she continued, "but seeing how it's impacted my daughter, I'm convinced. This project is doing something good. It's letting our kids express things that matter. Things they've been afraid to say. Tyler exchanged a surprised glance with Tarek, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. Mrs. Rodriguez took a deep breath before finishing. If you think stopping this project will make things easier, you're wrong. It'll just make things worse. After the meeting, Tyler, Tarek, and Derek walked out into the parking lot, still buzzing from the intensity of the discussion. They could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about the entire school, and what it was willing to accept. I can't believe she said that, Tarek said, still processing Mrs. Rodriguez's words. She literally just gave us more power than we could have asked for. Tyler nodded. Yeah. I didn't expect that. But it proves something. People don't hate what we're doing. They're afraid of what it means for them. And what does it mean for them? Derek asked. Tyler thought for a moment. It means they have to reckon with the truth. It means they have to look at things differently, and maybe, they don't want to. Later that week, things began to escalate. There were anonymous complaints about the project, allegations of it being too political, too divisive. Parents continued to call the school. Rumors spread that the project would be suspended indefinitely. Tyler wasn't surprised. But he also wasn't backing down. Then came the bombshell. Principal Jacobs sent out an email announcing that the school board had voted to suspend Project Mirror for the rest of the semester. The reasoning? A need for further evaluation to ensure it was in line with educational goals. Tyler read the email, then slammed his phone down on the table. They can't just shut us down, he said, anger creeping into his voice. Not after everything we've done. But Tarek, ever the optimist, looked at the situation differently. We've made an impact, he said. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of the fight. Derek stood up, determined. Let's take this to the next level. That night, the group sat down together and started planning. If the school board thought they could end Project Mirror just like that, they were wrong. This wasn't over. It was just heating up. We'll organize, Tarek said, his eyes burning with resolve. We'll take this to the students, to the community. They can't ignore us forever. Tyler nodded. And we'll make sure they know exactly why this matters. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. But now, it was clear, this wasn't just a school project anymore. It was a movement. And movements don't get silenced that easily. The following week, the tension at the school was palpable. The suspension of Project Mirror, though not permanent, felt like a blow to the students who had worked so hard to make their voices heard. For Tyler, Tarek, Derek, and the rest of the Project Mirror team, it wasn't just a setback, it was a challenge. They had made waves. They had disrupted the status quo. And now, they had to show the world, and the administration, that their fight was far from over. It wasn't long before the student body began to buzz with news of the suspension. For some, it was a victory for order. For others, it was a personal defeat. But for a few, those who had been directly involved in Project Mirror, it felt like a call to arms. The question was no longer whether they should continue, but how they would fight back. Tarek was the first to organize a meeting. He didn't want to wait for someone else to take the lead. He knew what was at stake. He texted Tyler and Derek, asking them to meet in the school library during lunch. The three of them sat together at a table in the corner, surrounded by books and the hum of quiet conversation. Tarek looked determined, his eyes steady as he addressed the group. We can't let this go. We can't let them stop us now. They think suspending Project Mirror will end this, but it won't. This is bigger than a school project now. It's about making sure every voice gets heard. Derek leaned forward. I've been talking to some people in the student council. We can get a petition going, and we'll take it straight to the school board. If we get enough signatures, they won't be able to ignore us. Tyler nodded, his jaw set. We need to involve the parents. They might be the ones who can make the biggest difference. They're the ones who vote. They're the ones who decide whether this project lives or dies. Tarek smiled, a spark of hope in his eyes. Exactly. We're not just going to fight for this project. We're fighting for our right to speak. We're fighting for what we started, for the change we've made. The three of them spent the next hour strategizing. They would need to rally the students, get support from parents, and most importantly, they needed to amplify their message. The school board couldn't silence them if they were too loud. Tarek stood up, fired up. We have the power to change things. Let's show them what happens when we all stand together. The next day, the group hit the ground running. They started by organizing a rally after school. Tarek designed posters, bold, colorful, and impossible to ignore, while Derek and Tyler began circulating the petition, making sure they had a presence in every corner of the school. The hallways filled with a sense of purpose as students started to talk, to sign, to get involved. By the end of the day, the petition had gained hundreds of signatures. But that was just the beginning. The rally itself was the real turning point. Students showed up in droves, wearing mirrors, literal mirrors, on their backpacks, as a symbol of their commitment to self-expression and transparency. Tarek, Tyler, and Derek stood at the front, rallying the crowd. Tarek spoke first, his voice loud and confident. We've been told that what we're doing is too much, that we're making people uncomfortable. But you know what? It's time for the truth. We've been uncomfortable for too long. And we're not going to back down now. Tyler picked up where Tarek left off. We've seen what happens when we stay silent. We've seen what happens when we let the system control what we can and can't say. Project Mirror isn't just about us, it's about everyone who's ever been told to keep quiet. To stay in their lane. Derek, normally quiet and reserved, stepped forward, his voice unwavering. We're not just fighting for this project. We're fighting for the right to be heard. To be seen. To be us. The crowd roared in agreement, the energy building until it felt like the entire school was behind them. The rally was a turning point. It wasn't just a protest, it was a movement. That evening, the petition was sent to the school board. Tarek, Tyler, and Derek, along with a group of dedicated students, stayed up late compiling the signatures and writing a letter of support, explaining why Project Mirror mattered. The letter read: Dear School Board. We, the students of school name, believe that Project Mirror represents a vital step toward creating a more open, inclusive, and authentic school environment. The suspension of this initiative is a blow to our rights as students to express ourselves, to confront the challenges that we face, and to be heard. We ask you to reconsider the suspension of Project Mirror and instead recognize the positive impact it has had on our school community. The lessons we've learned through this project, about empathy, about listening, about facing the uncomfortable truths, are lessons that extend far beyond the classroom. We are not asking for permission to speak. We are demanding our right to be heard. Sincerely. List of students. The next morning, the board members received the petition along with a flood of emails from students, parents, and teachers who supported the project. The school board meeting was scheduled for the following week, and there was a palpable sense of anticipation in the air. For the first time in a long time, it felt like the students were in control. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek arrived early, the weight of the situation heavy on their shoulders. They knew this would be their moment to make their case, to prove that Project Mirror wasn't just some fleeting school trend, it was a fundamental part of the culture they were building. The room quickly filled with people. Parents, students, and even a few teachers were present to support the cause. As the meeting began, Principal Jacobs stood at the front, looking both nervous and resigned. It was clear that the administration was on the defensive. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek stood together, ready to speak. But this time, it wasn't just about them. It was about everyone who had found their voice through Project Mirror. It was about every student who had felt seen for the first time. Tarek stepped forward first, his voice steady and confident. We're not asking for permission to speak. We're asking for the right to be heard. We've already shown that this project works. It's brought us together. It's given us a platform to express who we are. It's changed lives. Tyler followed. We know that change is hard. We know that we've challenged some long-standing traditions. But sometimes, that's what progress looks like. It's uncomfortable. It's messy. But it's necessary. Derek stepped up, his gaze unwavering. We've all seen what happens when we stay silent. We've seen how the truth gets buried. Project Mirror is our way of shining a light on the things we've been too afraid to talk about. And with that, they had made their case. The school board listened quietly, the weight of the words sinking in. No one knew how it would end. But one thing was certain, Project Mirror had changed everything. The days after the school board meeting were filled with a sense of waiting. The decision wasn't going to be made immediately, but the impact of the students' words, Tyler, Tarek, and Derek's passionate pleas, lingered in the air like a heavy storm cloud. The whole school seemed to hold its breath, wondering what would happen next. The students had made their case, but now it was up to the board to decide if Project Mirror would continue or if it would be buried under the weight of bureaucracy and fear. The tension between the students and the administration was at an all-time high. Teachers, staff, and parents who had either supported or opposed the project were now discussing the issue openly, some even organizing informal meetings to talk about the broader implications. Project Mirror had done more than just expose divisions, it had forced people to reckon with issues they had long ignored. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek felt the weight of it all, especially as they walked through the school hallways, greeted by their peers with either cautious support or whispered doubts. Some students were talking about it like it was the next big revolution, others were worried about the consequences of speaking out. Do you think we've done enough? Tarek asked one afternoon as they sat in the cafeteria, picking at their lunch. His voice was quiet, laced with uncertainty. Tyler looked at him, meeting his gaze. I think we've done everything we can. Now it's out of our hands. Derek leaned back in his chair, his eyes on the door, where a few board members were walking past. We've made noise. We've made them listen. That's more than most people can say. Tarek nodded but still looked unconvinced. What if they still shut us down? Tyler leaned forward, his expression resolute. Then we keep fighting. We don't stop just because they say no. We keep pushing. We keep raising our voices. We've already changed things just by being here. Just then, the loudspeaker crackled, breaking their conversation. A voice came over, calm and authoritative. Attention students and staff, the school board will be meeting tomorrow afternoon to announce their decision on Project Mirror. All are welcome to attend. The announcement sent a ripple of excitement and anxiety through the cafeteria. Everyone had been waiting for this moment, unsure of what would come next. Tomorrow, Tarek muttered, looking around at the students who were now whispering and nodding to one another. This is it. The following afternoon, the school auditorium was packed. Students filled the seats, parents crowded the back, and teachers stood along the sides. The air was thick with anticipation as everyone waited for the school board to enter. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek stood near the front, taking in the scene. They could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. Principal Jacob stood at the podium, his face tense. He cleared his throat before addressing the crowd. As you all know, the school board has been reviewing Project Mirror, an initiative started by our students to encourage self-expression, honesty, and inclusivity. After much consideration, we are here to announce our decision. A hush fell over the room. All eyes were on him. We understand that Project Mirror has brought about a variety of reactions, some supportive, others concerned. After careful discussion, the board has decided to allow the project to continue, but with some modifications. We feel that while it has provided valuable insights, we must ensure that the safety and comfort of all students is maintained. We will be working closely with student leaders to ensure that the program is implemented in a way that benefits everyone. The crowd erupted into applause. Some students cheered, while others exchanged stunned glances. Tyler and Tarek exchanged a look, their faces lighting up with relief. It wasn't a perfect outcome, but it was a victory. Project Mirror had been allowed to continue. But Principal Jacobs wasn't finished. There will be guidelines put in place. We'll be organizing regular meetings with student representatives to monitor how the project evolves. It is imperative that we continue to foster a safe and respectful environment for all. The announcement left a bitter aftertaste. While Project Mirror had won, there were still restrictions looming. It wasn't complete freedom, it was a compromise. Still, it was more than they had hoped for in the beginning. Tyler stood tall, feeling the pressure lift from his shoulders. He had been afraid that the board would completely shut them down, but now, it felt like a small but meaningful win. Tarek, however, was already looking beyond the board's decision. "This is just the beginning," he said under his breath, a fire still burning in his eyes. "We've shown them we're not backing down. They can't put a leash on this." Derek gave a soft chuckle. "Nope. This thing is bigger than any rules they can impose. We've got the support now. It's only going to grow." After the meeting, the hallways were abuzz with conversations. Some students were excited about the continuation of Project Mirror, while others, particularly those who had opposed the project, felt the sting of compromise. Tyler walked with Tarek and Derek through the crowd, hearing snippets of conversation along the way. "It's not over," one student said, speaking to a group gathered by their lockers. "The whole thing is still too political." "I still don't get why it's such a big deal," another student replied. "They're just talking about their experiences. It's not like they're forcing anyone to listen." But even as the support continued to grow, there were those who didn't share the same view. As they walked, Tyler felt a strange mix of victory and apprehension. They had won, but the fight was far from over. Now, it was about ensuring that the changes they had started didn't get diluted. They had to keep pushing for real change, for a world where self-expression was truly free. That night, Tyler sat in his room, reflecting on the events of the day. He felt a weight lift off his chest, but it was replaced by something else, determination. "This is just the start," he thought. "We've got a long road ahead, but we've already taken the first step. And nothing's going to stop us now." He picked up his phone and texted Tarek and Derek. "Tomorrow. We meet. We keep this going." Within seconds, Tarek replied, followed by Derek. "Let's do it." Tyler smiled. They were far from done. And the revolution of self-expression? That was just beginning. The days after the school board's decision were a blur of planning, adjustments, and surprising challenges. While many students celebrated the continuation of Project Mirror, there were those who were uncomfortable with the new boundaries the school had set. The guidelines introduced by the administration had stirred up mixed feelings, and the air at school had shifted. For some, it was a victory, but for others, it felt like a concession that diluted the heart of the movement. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek spent countless hours after school with their group of supporters, discussing what Project Mirror would look like moving forward. The new restrictions meant they had to be careful about how they approached the project. They needed to find a way to keep it authentic while working within the framework that the administration had set. "I'm telling you, this is going to be a challenge," Tarek said, pacing back and forth in their usual meeting spot in the school's library. His frustration was clear. The whole point of Project Mirror was to have open and honest conversations without all these rules about safety and comfort. The real stuff, the messy stuff, that's where the change happens. Tyler nodded in agreement, leaning against the table. "I get it, Tarek. But we still have the support of the students. We still have a platform. We just have to be more strategic about how we use it." Derek, who had been sitting quietly at the back of the room, spoke up. "It's not about compromising the message. It's about keeping the movement alive, finding new ways to push the envelope. We have to adapt, not just for us, but for everyone who's counting on us. Tarek stopped pacing and turned to face them. His expression softened, but his determination was still palpable. You're right, Derek. It's just frustrating. We've been through so much to get here, and now we're facing a new set of challenges. Tyler took a deep breath and straightened. We're going to make this work. We've already shown that we can overcome obstacles. This is just another one. The next day, the three of them returned to school, ready to face the next phase of the project. They'd gathered a team of students to help them organize a new approach, one that would align with the guidelines set by the administration while still maintaining the spirit of Project Mirror. They started small. Instead of the controversial mirror presentations they'd used before, they decided to hold smaller, more controlled group discussions, something that could still encourage personal sharing and open conversation, but without the risk of chaos or discomfort. They also planned workshops with teachers to help integrate Project Mirror into different subjects like history and literature, so that students could explore issues of identity and self-expression in a more structured setting. We can still use this platform to share our stories, just in a way that's more intentional, Tyler explained to the team. We'll work within the system, but we'll never let it define us. As the weeks went by, the new format began to take shape. The students involved in Project Mirror started collaborating with teachers to lead discussions on topics like race, family, self-worth, and the difficulties of growing up. These sessions were raw, emotional, and thought-provoking. But at the same time, there was a constant undercurrent of tension. The students weren't the only ones who had opinions on Project Mirror's evolution. The administration had made it clear that any conversations that bordered on controversial or uncomfortable would be closely monitored. Teachers were expected to moderate discussions carefully, and any signs of unrest could result in the project being pulled again. Tyler could feel the pressure building. There were moments when the raw honesty of the students pushed boundaries, and he could sense that some of the teachers were struggling to find the balance between supporting the project and following the new rules. One afternoon, after a particularly tense group discussion about the challenges of dealing with societal expectations, Tyler overheard a conversation between two teachers in the hallway. They didn't realize he was listening. I'm just not sure about this Project Mirror thing anymore, one teacher said, her voice tinged with worry. It started off with such promise, but now it feels controlled. Like it's being watered down to fit into this safe space bubble. The other teacher sighed. I hear you. But at the same time, we can't afford to alienate the administration. We need to keep things from escalating. We're walking a fine line here. Tyler felt a pang of frustration, but he knew they were right. The whole point of Project Mirror was to push boundaries and challenge the status quo, yet now, it felt like the walls were closing in. But even with these new challenges, Tyler, Tarek, and Derek refused to back down. They decided that they needed to find new ways to engage the students, to keep the energy of the project alive, and to remind everyone that their mission wasn't just about continuing the project, it was about transforming the culture of the school. One day, as they sat in their usual meeting spot in the library, Derek spoke up with an idea. We need to make it personal again. We need to go beyond just safe conversations and find a way to make people understand what's really at stake here. Tyler raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? We need to bring in stories, real stories, not just the stuff we've been talking about in those group discussions. We need to get personal. Maybe if we can help people understand the real pain behind these issues, it'll open their eyes. Tarek leaned forward, intrigued. You're saying we should share more of our own experiences? Our own struggles? Derek nodded. Exactly. We've been so focused on keeping things neat and tidy, but sometimes the messier it gets, the more powerful it becomes. Tyler thought about it for a moment, then nodded. All right. Let's do it. But we'll need to be careful. We don't want to get kicked out again. And so, they made a plan. Over the next few weeks, they began to collect personal stories from students, about their battles with identity, their experiences with racism, their struggles with family, and their triumphs over adversity. They crafted these stories into a new format that would speak directly to their peers, using video diaries, art, and spoken word performances. They called it the Project Mirror Showcase. The first showcase was scheduled for a Friday afternoon. Students gathered in the auditorium, curious about the new format. The air was thick with anticipation as they watched the first few performances. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek took the stage together, ready to kick off the event. Tyler opened with a few words. "This isn't just about us. It's about you, too. We've all got something to say, something to share. And no matter what the rules say, no matter what boundaries they try to set, we will find a way to be heard." The showcase began. Students shared their stories, some in tears, others with raw energy. It was a powerful moment of vulnerability and connection. The message was clear: this was bigger than the rules. This was about truth. As the final story was shared, the room stood in stunned silence. Then, as if on cue, the entire auditorium erupted in applause. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek exchanged glances. They had done it. Despite the constraints, they had created something that was both impactful and true to the spirit of Project Mirror. It wasn't just about following the rules, it was about transcending them. They had found a way to keep their message alive, and the fight was far from over. The weeks following the Project Mirror showcase were marked by an energy that could only be described as revolutionary. What started as an effort to spark change within a high school had turned into a powerful movement that reached far beyond the school's walls. The showcase had ignited something in the students, a fire that burned brighter than before. The idea that their voices could matter, that their stories could shift perspectives, had taken root in a way they hadn't imagined. For Tyler, Tarek, and Derek, the victory they had fought for was no longer just about the project, it was about creating a lasting impact. They had started something bigger than themselves, and now it was time to see how far it could go. The news spread quickly across the school. Students from all walks of life reached out, wanting to get involved, wanting to share their stories. What had begun as a small group of passionate individuals had grown into a movement that touched every corner of the school. Teachers, parents, and even local community leaders began to take notice. The dialogue had shifted. Conversations about race, identity, and self-expression were no longer being silenced, they were being heard. But as the movement grew, so did the pressure. Project Mirror had always been about open dialogue, but now, with its success, there was a new set of challenges to face. The administration's tolerance for the project was starting to wear thin. The school board had begun to express concerns about the potential for the project to spiral out of control. Some of the older staff members, who had never fully supported the initiative, began questioning its value. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek met in the library late one afternoon, the familiar sense of urgency in the air. "We've got their attention now," Tarek said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of what was to come. "But I'm not sure the administration is going to let this go on much longer. They're starting to feel uncomfortable with how much influence this project is having." Derek leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the table. "We knew this wasn't going to be easy. But we've come too far to back down now. We can't let them shut us down, not when we're finally being heard." Tyler sat back, his mind racing. The stakes had never been higher. They had made it this far because they refused to accept the limitations others had set for them. If they were going to keep pushing forward, they needed to act. "We're not stopping," Tyler said firmly. "We're going to show them that Project Mirror is bigger than they think. It's not just about this school. It's about every student who feels silenced. Every voice that hasn't been heard." They knew what they had to do next. The next day, Tyler and Tarek approached the student council, asking for their support in organizing a final event that would serve as the culmination of everything they had worked for. They envisioned something that would not only showcase the impact of Project Mirror but would also serve as a bold statement, that this was not just a school project, it was a movement that deserved to be celebrated. The event would be called the Mirror Movement, a celebration of voices. It would be a gathering like no other, a powerful representation of everything they had fought for. Students from every background, every culture, and every corner of the school would come together to share their stories. It would be a culmination of art, music, poetry, and spoken word, a celebration of self-expression and the power of truth. Tyler, Tarek, and Derek spent the following days organizing the event, reaching out to students, teachers, and even parents who had been impacted by the project. They worked tirelessly to ensure that every voice had a platform, that every story would be told. As the day of the event drew closer, the energy in the school became electric. Posters advertising the event covered every wall. Students spoke in hushed, excited tones as they made plans to attend. Teachers, many of whom had initially been unsure about the project, were now helping in any way they could. The movement had created an unspoken bond between everyone involved, a shared understanding that they were part of something much larger than themselves. But even as the excitement grew, Tyler couldn't shake the feeling that the administration was watching closely. The pressure was mounting. They had already allowed Project Mirror to continue, but how much longer would they tolerate it? How much longer could they push against the boundaries that were being set? The day of the event arrived, and the auditorium was packed. The excitement in the air was palpable. Students, teachers, and parents filled the seats, waiting in anticipation for what was to come. Tyler stood backstage with Tarek and Derek, their hearts racing. This was it, the moment they had all been working toward. There was no turning back now. "You guys ready for this?" Derek asked, his voice tinged with excitement. Tarek smiled, though it was clear he was feeling the weight of the moment. "I think we've been ready all along." Tyler nodded, his mind focused. "Let's show them what we're made of." The lights dimmed, and the first performer took the stage, a sophomore named Jasmine, who had been one of the first students to speak out in the early days of Project Mirror. She was a quiet, reserved girl, but on stage, her words flowed like a river, raw and honest. "I'm tired of being invisible," Jasmine said, her voice strong. "I'm tired of feeling like I don't matter, like my story isn't worth telling. But today, I'm here. And my voice matters." The audience fell silent, absorbed in her words. Tyler could feel the energy in the room shift. This was more than just an event, it was a collective experience. Every story shared, every poem read, every song sung, brought the crowd closer together. There was an unspoken understanding that this was something special, something important. One by one, students took the stage, sharing their truths. There were tears, laughter, and moments of powerful silence. It was a raw, beautiful display of self-expression, and it was clear to everyone in the room that Project Mirror had done exactly what it had set out to do, it had given people the courage to speak their truth. As the event drew to a close, Tyler, Tarek, and Derek took the stage together, standing side by side, looking out at the sea of faces before them. "This is our legacy," Tyler said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "This project was never about us. It was about all of you, every single person who has a story to tell. We've built something here. And it's not just about what happens at this school. It's about the power we have when we stand together, when we use our voices for change." Tarek added, "This movement isn't over. It will never be over. We've sparked something that can't be put out. We've started a conversation that's going to keep growing. And it's up to all of us to keep it going." Derek smiled, his voice strong and filled with conviction. "We've shown the world that our voices matter. And no one can take that away." The crowd erupted into applause, standing to their feet in a show of solidarity and support. The air was thick with emotion, and for the first time in a long while, Tyler felt the weight of the fight lift. They had done it. They had created a movement that would continue to inspire, long after they were gone. As the final applause faded, Tyler, Tarek, and Derek stood together, their hearts full. They had faced incredible odds, but in the end, they had proven that when people stand together and fight for what they believe in, anything is possible. Project Mirror had come full circle. It had started as a simple idea, a way to bring people together, and had transformed into a legacy that would live on long after they had graduated. The fight for change had only just begun. And as long as there were voices to be heard, there would be people willing to stand up and speak. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?